Can Scotland be independent in the EU? Okay, Busting Indy Myths Part 27. Scotland can't be independent in the EU because it is a contradiction in terms. And this is a particularly important point to make because the march at the weekend organised by Humza Yousaf and the national newspaper is for independence for Scotland in the EU. Okay, that's how they are actually describing it. Independence for Scotland in the EU. That's the name of their march. And this person here writing in the National yesterday she goes, "This event, organised in partnership with Believe in Scotland, aims to unite the Yes movement for Scotland's independence and its re-entry into the European Union." Well, how can you have an independent Scotland in the European Union? An independent Scotland's sovereignty is going to be highly constrained within the European Union. It's going to be constrained economically and democratically and politically as far as policies are concerned. For example, economically, it is going to be required to join the euro. Okay, so it will mean that Scotland won't have its own independent currency. I mean, forget even about keeping the pound. If you did set up a Scottish national bank to promote a particular Scottish currency, okay, that would be understandable from a particular point of view. But they don't even want to do that. They actually want to give up their opportunity to do that and to join the euro. And in fact, you have to. You have to give up your independent currency if you want to get into the EU. So giving up your currency is an automatic requirement to join the European Union. So how on earth is that independence? Secondly, in order to join the euro, you have to do what's called, you have to keep your fiscal deficit, as it's called, at a low percentage, at 3%. Now, what's the fiscal deficit? The fiscal deficit is the difference between a government's spending and its revenue, the amount of money that it gets in. And that difference is expressed as a percentage of the overall gross domestic product of the country, because that provides a way of measuring the deficit in relation to the otherwise size of the economy. And in 22-23 tax year, Scotland's fiscal deficit was 9% of gross domestic product, which was pretty high, and that compared to the UK's overall deficit of 5.2. So it was almost double what the overall UK fiscal deficit is. And to join the euro, you need to get that down to 3% of GDP. And the only way you do that is by putting taxes through the roof and putting government expenditure through the floor. Okay, so you would have austerity max. Everybody would be getting taxed to the limit at the same time as government spending was going through the floor. That's the only way you could get that deficit right down. That's the only way you could get it down to 3%. So that would be extremely harmful as well if you wanted to join the EU. You won't be hearing those sorts of things from the speakers, though, at the march this weekend. They'll be pretending it's nothing to do with that. They'll be overlooking all of that, all of these terrible economic consequences. Furthermore, democratically, if we joined, Scotland would only have around about 14 seats in the European Parliament out of over 700 members of the European Parliament, which would be about 2% of the seats. So how is that any kind of democratic say, really, in what way the European Union is going to move? And that's before you even start asking whether or not it's right that all your laws should have to be made abroad. Why would you want to gain what you call independence from Westminster only to sign up to a very harsh regime in Brussels? So it doesn't make any sense, and it's a contradiction in terms. And there's many people, actually many Scottish nationalists, who don't even want that, and who won't be going along to the march on Saturday because they don't agree with that policy that the SNP and the Greens have, which doesn't make really any sort of sense, other than as some kind of reason because they don't like England, basically. So it's like anybody but we'll ally with anybody, regardless of how economically or democratically harmful it might be, just because we don't like Westminster and we don't like being part of the United Kingdom. I mean, that's really the only explanation you can really come to at the end of the day on those kind of matters. So independence in the European Union is it's a contradiction in terms, and it would be an economic disaster for Scotland, it would be a democratic disaster for Scotland, and it would be a policy disaster as well, because we would be facing the diktats of whatever the European Union thought was best for us. The fact is, we can't be independent Scotland as a member of the EU. We don't believe it was ever a good idea for the United Kingdom to have been a member of the EU. Scotland doesn't want to go back into all of that again. In fact, we'll get far more benefits in the long term by staying part of the United Kingdom and working for good leadership here in Scotland as part of the United Kingdom in the world, taking advantage of trading with the entire world and not simply the countries in the European Union bloc.